Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balcerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real-world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI-powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balcerzak. Today's guest has been in the industry for about 20 years. He and I worked shoulder to shoulder together at Allstate, him on the privacy side, me on the data security side. He's worked across multiple industries such as insurance, pharmaceutical, and food and beverage. Daley Varghese, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ward. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have you here. So let's jump right in. Are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. In your professional opinion, what's the biggest data security challenge organizations are facing?
Yeah. This, I feel like, can be a very loaded question depending on who you're asking. But, from my privacy vantage point, it's not just hackers or ransomware. I believe it's data sprawl in an AI-driven world. Sensitive information lives across clouds, SaaS tools, third-party processors, and AI models. And without a clear inventory, classification, and governance strategy, organizations can't effectively protect personal data, meet regulatory obligations, or, dare I say, even build trust with their consumers. So, for me, that's kind of where it's at. And, where society is headed with this AI technology. I think it's ever more important now, to figure out where your data is, to classify it, and know what to do with it.
Oh man, so I gave you a loaded question, you gave me a loaded answer. I love it. I love it. There's a lot there, I think, to unpack for our listeners. So, I heard data sprawl is a big issue. I heard AI compounds that issue, and then I heard maybe you gave us a sampling of how to solve it. So, uh, you're currently the director of North American Privacy, so certainly you deal with this day in and day out. You've worked for very large companies. How have you tried to solve for those two big issues? And again, I'm calling two different issues, but certainly they come together: data sprawl and AI. What are you doing, man?
Yeah. So we'll start with data sprawl, right? I think the first and foremost I'll say is ensuring that a proper governance strategies are in place, right? And this is a partnership with privacy, security, data governance, right? Your governance teams that are out there that are trying to protect the company, from the potential higher risk issues that they may face, right? And so I'm a big proponent of ensuring that those strategies are put in place and that the businesses know how to operate within those realms. So what do I mean by that? It means by first of all, engaging them in conversation prior to their project, right? If they're, charting on a use case that's going to use sensitive personal information, touch hundreds of thousands of customers, get in touch with your data governance folks, right? Get in touch with the folks that are leading data security and privacy to understand what those risks are, because folks in the business may not know those risks, and they don't have to necessarily, right? Like their job may be to, develop this program or develop this app and get it out there and get consumers to log in. They're not going to know everything under the sun. And just like your privacy professional or your cyber professional, we're all brought together as SMEs. And so we conduct risk assessments to understand, what it is that they're trying to do, how are they trying to do it? And so we can effectively share then how do we mitigate risks. Can't prevent risk, but you can certainly mitigate them or lower the risk, for a particular use case. So that, first and foremost, is engaging the right people at the right time. And why do I say before? We all know that everyone wants to move at the speed of light. Everybody wants to innovate quickly and push to production. The sooner you can engage us, the sooner we can help. And some of them have long tails, right? So, that's first and foremost.
Yeah, and I think, and I've had a few episodes where my guests have brought up relationship building. I think back to good old Allstate when you and I were there. I remember coming to you, or you came to me. I don't remember, right? It feels like so long ago, but also yesterday at the same time. I remember us talking. I said, look, like you and I are gonna be best friends. We're gonna sit down. We're gonna figure this out together. So you and I built a relationship, but how from a privacy perspective, I feel like I feel like business understands security for the most part because it's in their face, right? It's part of probably annual training. They likely think of them as the bad guys, right? The men in black, all that. From a privacy perspective, um, do you face similar challenges kind of breaking through and forming those relationships, or is it a little easier on your side?
No, absolutely. I think the challenges are the same. Maybe more, maybe a little controversial, but maybe more because to your point, right? I think you alluded. I think most people are aware of cybersecurity, the issues, data breaches, right? Um, Privacy, personal information is a subset to all the data that's out there, right? There is financial data, right? There's material, not public data. But privacy really has a hard focus on personal information. And sometimes people don't know that like personal information is personal information, like email address. Hey, like my email address contains my name. You can clearly see it, right? And so sometimes it's hard to make that kind of real world connection into personal information to what it actually is and why it's important, right? And when we deal with like sensitive personal information, such as like financial account numbers, your date of birth, your passport numbers, it begs even more controls, right? We have regulatory regulations out there. We have laws that are out there that specifically say there's a delineation for the sensitive personal information, how it needs to be protected. And so I would say, to go back to your question, we face the same barriers. And I think one of the biggest things is education, right? How do we get in front of the business? How do we educate those that need to do it? You touched on it. One of them is those learning modules, right? That like folks can do. But I find in that's not enough. That's not enough in the industry. We need to do more and build relationships deep down, join their team meetings, have an all hands or town hall and become a topic of relevance because in our industry, we're trying to, put the narrative out there that uh, privacy is important, but privacy is a competitive advantage, just like security is, right? We push a product that is privacy centric. You're earning the trust of your consumers, right? And trust it's hard to get, but so easily lost. And so it's imperative for companies to ensure that we can look at privacy as that competitive advantage, and then we can get in front of our businesses and tell that story, and so that we can all tell the story together, which is living within the mission and values of the company that you're working for.
Awesome. That was a great answer. So kind of going back to data sprawl as being a big challenge. How do you, and certainly with the privacy lens that you bring to it, like how do you look to solve for that problem? You kind of touched on an assessment, which I'm going to assume like a PIA, right? A privacy impact assessment and all that. You know, from my experience, I feel like, those PIAs are generally well understood for like applications. Hey, I'm going to stand up this new SaaS application. I need to do a PIA or whatever, right? As part of that, usually you have security, a vendor security type of analysis going with it. I feel like it's a bit harder when you talk about data repositories, right? Things that are either in the network, outside of the network, whatever. So, again, in your experience, what have you tried to do to really kind of one get your arms around that problem, but two try to solve for it?
Yeah. So one of the things I would say is like ensuring that we have a solid partnership with all our governance folks, right? Whether it be data governance, and if the company has a data governance team, hopefully they do. Um, they're keeping a fantastic inventory of this data and how the data moves within their systems, right? Data mapping is nothing net new. I mean, it's been around forever, right? And ensuring that the data governance folks have an appropriate mapping of where the data is in the company. So stakeholders like us, like privacy and or security, can just tap in, and figure out where it is. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'll sidebar a little bit. One thing I keep hearing is like assessment fatigue, and I get it, right? You do a PIA, it's very similar to a cyber security threat analysis, is very secure, similar to a data governance review. There is assessment fatigue. Companies can do a better job of work making sure the businesses are talking with each other, especially the compliance groups to build an easier, more efficient assessment. So the business is not answering the same question 5 different times in 10 different places, right? But to go back, one of the best ways to do this is ensure that we have appropriate data mapping. And like I said, it's either going back to the data governance teams or ensuring that we're asking the right questions to get to the heart of the answers. And so that's one big way we try to see that. And then also making sure that the questions are in layman terms, right? Making sure that the end user understands they're not privacy professionals. They're not going to know what we're asking. So let's keep it simple, but let's make it easy for them to answer. Last thing I'll probably say is what we try to do is also education. I'll always go back to education, is making sure the business understands how to complete the assessment in its entirety. We need detailed answers. And I know it can be cumbersome, but we need detailed answers. The slight shift, though, the difference in data element is the difference in the type of access controls. It's the different types of, what you can and can't do with that data. And it's a difference of what law may be in scope now. If you decide to do it as global, because you've involved certain data elements or you moved it from one country to another. It's all important factors that we need. So, ensuring that those assessments are out, partnering with our data governance folks and other regulatory folks to ensure that we're all speaking to one another to hopefully kind of quell that as an issue.
I'll tell you, something you said there really resonated, and it was giving me some flashbacks to a few organizations that I've worked for, and it was that the keep it simple, right, for the assessment. And man, oh man, are you right? I've developed a few assessments more for the data security side over the years, or I should say, my teams have, and I was always fortunate to have really smart engineers on my team. But with the caveat that they're really smart engineers, they didn't necessarily know how to dumb down or keep it simple the conversation or the questions for the users. So what that resulted in was hand holding. And I was kind of anti that. Like, we want to hand or provide the assessment to the business user, app owner, whatever, to fill out, not have to be there in a multi-person meeting to fill it out. So when it goes, so when you go back to the assessment, keeping it simple, I also heard you say data mapping. Um, Data mapping can be very complicated. So can you walk us through, in your minds, from a privacy or even a data security perspective, what are you looking for from a data mapping perspective?
To put it very simply, is I need to know all the data that's involved. What is it? Tell me every single data element that's in there. Specifically, personal information is more and more of my scope. So all the PI that's involved, and then how are we? How is the company consuming it? In which manner or which method is it coming through? Whether it's coming through an app, someone's filling out a survey, and so forth. Right? What's that entry point? Where does the data go? How is it being used? What systems is it touching? Is it being manipulated in any way? And then what is the output of that data? How is that being used? How is that being protected? Where is that being stored? It's a very simple. That's ideally where we'd like to start. Of course, we can unpack it further, given a use case, and dig in more to ensure that, hey, this is sensitive personal information. Do you have the appropriate encryption standards that are being followed? And we may not dig into it so much, but we'll work with our security partners, right? Because like us, we're in constant communication with each other on it to ensure that we're giving the best mitigations in a uniform front, so the business knows what to do and when to do it, how to do it, and push to production. So we try to start simple. Let's start there. Let's get that basic. And if you can get a Figma or a diagram, even better than putting it into a swim lane, that would be very much appreciated. But if we could just start there, that'd be great. But I think we like to start in ensuring that we have the basics of the information, and that is a basic. Adding a data mapping is a basic, and then we can dig into it further. Should the use case call for it.
I agree. I think a data mapping's you say basic, I say 101, same type of thing. Like, I know as I try to secure something, again, data security, it's about the data. I can't secure or protect something that I don't know what the heck it is. And data being amorphous and kind of just, moving, developing, forming, flowing makes it difficult, right? If you can't go back to that 101 capability, data mapping, Absolutely agree. Something else you mentioned before, assessment fatigue, right? I too think that's a real thing. Unfortunately, right? Even being a security practitioner, my own tools get assessed, right? So I definitely feel just like the business user. But a reason I bring up assessment fatigue, I'm curious your thoughts. So you've done a PIA, you've done an assessment, what have you. The application is being used. Doesn't matter in production, in development, whatever. In your opinion, what's the iteration that should be done for a reassessment? Because I'm sure you've dealt with this too, right? They put in an application or a tool for a reason, but oh my goodness, that reason has changed in 6 months, 12 months, whatever, and its usage, its patterns may have changed over that time as well.
I'll answer in two different ways. I think the better or best companies will have a risk calculation score that can identify based on the use case that, hey, we're working with more sensitive personal information, more sensitive data. This application is exposed to the public. There whatever the which ways you want to calculate that risk to show that it's heightened or it's low or moderate, right? If you don't have any of that, then I think it's using best judgment and at the very least an annual re-verification. Now I understand that could be burdensome to the business, right? So I think you have to understand, you have to, the team that's involved needs to understand what are their resources, what are their capabilities, what sort of funding did they have for the personnel, whether some of the stuff could be outsourced as like a remedial task that just gets reviewed. But I'll go back to like the best companies can do a risk calculation score. And so the riskier the use case, that would beg a re-verification after 6 months. Or typically what we'd like to capture is like, what's the end date? If there is an end date, meaning like if this use case is only meant to be, let's say like a test to the public for 6 months, hey, 6 months, we're gonna touch base with you. Has it changed? Has it not? If you're using sensitive data, if you're using machine learning or stuff to develop smart ways of calculations, then if it's using a trove of data, we'd want to probably look at that a little bit more sooner than later, or ensure that you have the appropriate controls in place, right? Like whether the model can calculate drift, whether it knows that it's hallucinating, right? And so ensuring that there is a human in the loop would probably beg that we will push re-verification out further, as long as that human in the loop element is there from the business. And if it's not there, then we need to do it a little bit sooner.
Man, that's good stuff. And you said something else, human in the loop. I think that's a very interesting phrase because and again, I'm sure you're seeing this, but I'm starting to see the industry shift, right? More and more. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I'm seeing, more reliance on. I'm not yet going to use that two-letter acronym, but I'm going to say, orchestration automation, right? We're starting to see people use more of that, or try to. But shoot, I'm going to say it. Starting to see AI, right? AI really jump into things, and in my opinion, both good and bad, right? Both good and bad usages of that. So going back to the big question I asked you, what's the biggest challenge? You mentioned both data sprawl and AI. So I'm curious. You said AI. What are you thinking? What's the big problem there?
So AI has been around for a long time, right? It's with the IBM, machines that are playing chess and competing on Jeopardy and whatnot. And I'll try to bucket it in a couple of things. One is the education around AI. Like I said, AI has been around forever, but a lot of people, companies that I've worked for and companies that and talk with and people in the industry is that they don't know the delineation between traditional AI and generative AI, right? And so when they're trying to assess the risks, they're conflating the two. Machine learning has been around forever. NLP has been around forever. It's not anything net new. So we shouldn't necessarily develop a brand new process to assess these risks, because hopefully you were assessing the risks before, right? Hopefully. But the likes of generative AI, the tools like the chat GPTs of the world and even image generation, right? Like those are the shiny new objects that is, punching information to us so much faster than we ever have. We thought Google search was super fast. ChatGPT is giving it to you in a digestible format. And so one problem I'll go back to is like that education and training is to be able to delineate what is net new, what is not, how should we proceed with doing risk assessment, how should we proceed with, ensuring that the appropriate guardrails in place. The last thing I'll talk about, at least on the education side, is change management. When you're putting in a tool that involves AI or generative AI, I feel like more companies are trying to get into the generative AI side, is ensuring that like not only do the employees know how to use it, but like our end users in the public know how to use it, right? End users in the public, that the appropriate disclaimers are in place, that like, hey, some of this information may not be correct, right? You need to vet it. This may not be absolutely right, but even internally, which I think is also a security risk as well, is ensuring to know how to appropriate use those tools, right? Like what you can upload and cannot upload. I'll go back to ChatGPT. It's open to the public. You don't want to upload sensitive financial data of your company in there. You don't want to upload PowerPoints that talked about new products that are going to be released that hasn't been released yet. It's not protected. But if you have a company owned instance, like an O365 instance, and you want to use Copilot, and your governance teams have done the appropriate assessments, there is room to grow where you can start using those tools. But that requires communication and education of how to appropriately use these tools. They're powerful, they're fantastic, but they need to be used responsibly. That's one big area. And then I'll say one more, and then I'll pipe down a little bit, is ensuring that the leaders of the businesses are aligned to what are priorities in moving new generative AI tools or projects, right? A lot of this is expensive, very expensive, right? And so you want to make sure that the company is using it, is choosing the right tools that they want to invest in, because some of these tools may expose known risks. And what do I mean by that? Is that,
Oh yeah.
you probably know where I'm going with this, is that companies probably have dirty data, like garbage data that has been stale for a really long time. A privacy-centric approach is ensuring that data is retained for as long as you need it, and then get rid of it because data gets stale. Well, now, if you have a generative AI tool that is using data like in these repositories that may not have been checked or may have outdated data, it's going to produce in the outputs terrible answers, right? And I always say crap in, crap out, right? And so that's another big issue, is that AI is being, or generative AI rather, even is being used to expose known risks. And so it's hard for companies to move faster because they need to go back and correct these risks that they may not have seen.
Yeah, and going back to your other answer too, data sprawl, like data sprawl plus AI, just conflates the problem, right? And the issue that's out there, especially to the last point you made, garbage in, garbage out, right? Like if you have this data everywhere, it's old, stale, incorrect, whatever, and maybe the education wasn't there, to your point about educating, people are just grabbing it, putting in there, and just trusting the good old prompt that comes back or response that comes back of, I always laugh. There was, and I think this was real, not a wives' tale, but there was I think it might have been Chat GPT. It doesn't matter, but somebody asked the question, how do I keep my cheese from sliding off the pizza? And somehow the AI came back with, oh, use glue to hold it, because they pulled from a Reddit post where somebody was being funny and said like use Elmer's glue or something to keep it on there. But I think it's a prime example, right? Of it goes back to a security mantra: trust but verify, right? Trust what's coming back to you, but obviously verify it. So in the world that you've just set up for us of data sprawl, enter in AI as well, for those organizations that might not have done the 101 stuff yet, right? Done the data mapping and all that, where do you think they should start? Because it's very likely that we've got listeners today that are living that world. Unfortunately, I know my last couple organizations guarantee they're living that world too. So, your perspective from a privacy angle, where do our listeners start?
Talk to your governance folks as soon as possible. privacy, legal, security, data governance, other folks within that realm, start with the conversation. You're not going to know everything, but when you tap the shoulders of the professionals, they're going to give you their take, and you take that all in as data points and start understanding what that ecosystem even looks like for the company. They'll be able to provide insights and ideas that you probably didn't even think of. And I would come in with a listener mindset and not a judgment mindset that, hey, this is like, it's like getting an audit, right? It's not meant to say, oh, you're doing this bad, you're doing this bad, you're doing this bad. No, like, let's figure out where we need to shore up, right? Where we need to get better, where we need to mature. I think that's the key word. How do we mature the program to where it is, from where it is to the next level? So start there, start the conversations, because you soon realize that, and I'll say this for the listeners, like, no company is perfect. Every company is struggling with this. And so, like, it's okay. It's okay to have these risks identified. What is not okay is, once you know that these risks are identified, don't do nothing. That is not okay. Figure it out. Add it to your 3-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan. Figure out your budget, your resourcing. Where does this fall? Where does this risk need to be tended to? And then start small, right? I tell people all the time, and this is, I tell people this at work and in every part of my life, is like, don't try to eat the apple in one setting. You're going to choke. Take bites of the apple, right? And eventually you'll finish it. So take bites of what needs to what you find out and what you rank as a priority, and eventually you'll get there. And when you get there, you will build better products. It'll be easier. It'll be much faster to build, because you would have all this stuff in place, and these risks would have been mitigated. So we don't even have to talk about it. We just move right to the use case and out to production. Perfect world.
Yeah. And, going back to your Apple analogy, like, if you're going to take that bite, you got to chew it. And that kind of dovetails to what you said of, like, once you know the risk, you have to do something about it. Like, I always joked, and I probably said this to you once upon a time too. Like, I've told a few people jokingly, like, don't tell me that. Don't tell me about that problem or risk, because now I have to put that on my plate and actually execute. Like, no, don't bring me more work. But no, you're absolutely right. I kind of, in my consulting time, I've asked about risk registers before too, right? And I say, okay, how old are they? Are you keeping up with them? Are you reassessing? And are you actually closing things? Or is it just literally a register that's going on till the end of time? Because I'm sure you probably agree, like, if there's gonna be a risk out there for 5 years or longer, you probably should just accept the darn thing and call it a day, right? Put somebody's, John Hancock on it, move on to something else, but actually show that you're doing something meaningful to reduce risk overall, which risk acceptance is a way.
Another part to that is too, is like, when you're professionals, when you're talking to your security professionals, your privacy professionals and whatnot, and they're talking about this and we're logging it, we're not the bad guys. We're not here to slow you down. We're here to help build better products, ultimately to the customer, ultimately, again, with that trust, because they trust us with their data, that we are doing the right thing, and when we can use it as a competitive advantage, right? And where I say tapping the professionals, like, they can help you get creative in problem solving. One of the things that we talked about earlier was hand holding, right? And I think that's an issue everywhere. There's a level of hand holding that needs to happen, but where we can get creative, and what I've done is, how can we develop playbooks, our most important use cases for education, quick, dirty information that tells them exactly what to do. Another thing is privacy champions, right? Like, because this is a time suck, a resource strain on privacy, on security, to consistently do this. But if you can train somebody within the businesses, within the organization, to be a security champion, a privacy champion, to know and be a SME, they can then proliferate that data to their team, and then it spreads, right? And so then they can advocate, and they can build the requirements and mitigations upfront. So by the time they get to you in your assessment, hopefully, some or most have been mitigated.
That's powerful. That actually reminds me of a conversation I've had in the last 6 months or so. Someone came to me and said, "Hey, Ward, how does a CISO know all of these regulations that they need to adhere to?" And they were talking about, security ones, NYDFS. They were talking about privacy regulations as well. And I kind of laughed. I said they don't. But here's the thing, they have trusted folks that do, right? Hopefully they have a privacy team. Hopefully they have a legal team. Some CISOs out there do also have the privacy hat. You know, feel a little bit sorry for them, but I think at the end of the day, they have some of those champions that can assist with reading into what's going on, bringing that, and making it real for the organization, right? Because not everything is the same for everybody. So, with that, I want to ask you in particular, with your privacy background, it feels like there are new privacy regulations coming up all the time, or changes to them, or what have you. An obvious illustration of that are the state privacy laws, right? Very big, I'm a very big proponent for it, very happy, but I think it was last week I had just heard, I didn't know about it. There was another state that popped up, and I said, "Oh shoot, I didn't even know they had their own." I forget who it was now, but for you, how do you typically stay on top of that, and how do you arm your security counterparts with some of that knowledge?
You answered that question perfectly to your counterpart, because we don't know everything, right? And in the United States, these laws are fragmented. We don't have a one law to rule them all. We don't have a federal privacy law that just sits and encompasses everything like a GDPR, what the EU has, right? And so you get different states that are picking different topics and wanting to go. CCPA in California probably comes the closest to something very large, very mirroring GDPR. But then you got like Texas, and you got like, focusing on with children's law, and you got Washington with My Health, My Data. It is everywhere and everywhere. So a couple ways we try to stay on top is, to your point, we have folks that are SMEs within the area. We have a strong partnership with legal. That's first and foremost. When we're operating in a jurisdiction where we don't have presence, say like you're working for a global company, then we rely on outside counsel. We rely on counsel within the region to help bridge the knowledge gap that us as professionals may not have. There's also a lot of tools out there, which are great. The tools that can, when new laws get passed, or when requirements are in chambers that are getting votes, there's a lot of great tools out there that notify us of telling us, hey, this law is coming around the horn, or hey, this law is picking up momentum. And so that's a great way. Another great way is getting certifications as well within the business. That will help you kind of stay abreast of like what's happening in the world and what's happening within the country. And then the last place I would say is probably an unlikely place is staying close with your policy folks. If your company has, a governance team or policy team that is boots on the ground working in DC or working with lawmakers, they can help opine on like what are they thinking of? What are the hot button topics? What is the administration possibly looking at that may need some focus on, may need some time, attention, that can kind of give us an awareness and help us prepare. Because you can never stay ahead of everything, but trying to move from a reactive proactive phase by working in tangent with these folks, as well as using some of these tools that give you highlights of what's coming around the horn, I think is a great way to start. And I think these are all low hanging fruit that companies can attach to, and can see that really makes a difference.
Awesome. Awesome. Really good context. And it's very clear you know the space quite well. So I think the audience would love to hear, you're the director of North American privacy, and you've been in the industry for, just about 20 years. How did you get to where you are today?
I think like most folks, dare I say, that started in this industry a long time ago, which kind of fell into it. Privacy wasn't a big thing back then. I think when Meta had their issue with Cambridge Analytica, it became privacy was splattered all over the map. Then you have the EU coming out with regulations such as GDPR, and it became more heightened, right? And the way the EU looks at privacy is that's more of like an inherent right, where we kind of look at it differently here in the United States. But all this to say, I grew up into privacy, I would say. I had an early a taste of privacy during my early pharma days, touching with HIPAA, and then moving into when we were at Allstate, more of the traditional privacy, doing incident response, breach incident response, right? Privacy impact assessments, working with the parties and so forth. And I just fell into the love of it and the specialization of personal information. It was so fascinating to me. It had a lot to do with cyber, but it has its own unique regulatory requirements and obligations. So I probably, like most, going back to what I was saying, is I just grew into it, and I right place, right time, and matured in privacy when privacy as a discipline was maturing in and of itself, and got on kind of the groundwork and the foundation of like those topics. And so I get to where I am today, just real world experience and learning in the industry from other privacy professionals, but also standing on the shoulders of giants that I have been very fortunate enough to be mentored by in various companies, and that had led me in the right direction. And having conversations like this, Ward, that you and I can have, and talk about our passion, but hopefully others can listen in and hear it and take interest in it or learn something new, and then continue the conversation from there, has all led to kind of where I am at today.
Man, that's quite the journey. So you said mentors. I'm going to give you a good kind of introspection question here. So if you could go back in time to when you were just kind of starting out, maybe as you were just dipping your toe and learning about privacy. So if you could go back, today, what advice might you give yourself, or what might you change, if anything, for your path?
I dared to take uh, bolder steps in early on in the career. And what I mean by that is, I think earlier on, in a personal right inflection here, is that I shied away. When I didn't know something, I was like, okay, I don't know, and I'm not going to speak up. I'm not going to say anything. But what I found later in my career was then integrating with the folks that do know more, integrating with more of like the engineering side, the data architect side, like stuff that's not within my wheelhouse, but talking to them early on, learning their space, right? Working with you and learning the cyberspace even more, I became knowledgeable, right? And I think I probably could have excelled my path or much sooner. Um, dare I to take in those steps earlier on in my career. And I think more of to be honest, of full transparency, it was just fear of not knowing, and fear of looking like the person that doesn't know anything in the room or in the meeting. But a big part of where I got to where I got today, from what I said, is asking questions and learning, and leading with a curious mind, has certainly got to where I am today. So that'll probably be the one to tell Daley back in the day. It's like, hey, take more risks, man. Don't worry. Failing is just a first attempt in learning, right? So just go, and don't worry about anything else.
That's a great mentality and really, really good advice. I think a lot of folks, I know I would definitely have liked to tell myself that early on. So I feel like privacy is one of those paths, kind of like cyber, once upon a time, definitely data security, that not a lot of folks think about. Definitely seeing, and I'm guessing you probably are too, a lot more traction, right? A lot more organizations taking it seriously because they have to, right? So for those folks that might be listening that are contemplating, maybe a privacy path, do you have any recommendations on where they should start?
Yeah, a few places. One, if your company has a privacy team, first and foremost, but also lets you do internships or rotations with other organizations, I think that would be the best. See if you can get, if the team is offering it, see if you can get like 6 months rotation with the team, and get in and see how you can help. You can even start smaller than that by reaching out to your company's privacy professionals and getting a cup of coffee and just talking with them. I mean, that's actually where a lot of professionals that I know that have gotten in the industry started with. It's just grabbing a cup of coffee or grabbing lunch with a professional at their company and having a conversation and learning more. There's also professional organizations or sites out there, and organizations such as like IAPP. This is not a plug for them, but they're a great organization that does a lot of certifications. I have one. I have more coming down the horn, and a lot of job requirements out there call it out, having such certifications. So it'll be great to just explore their site, see what certifications they have, study, get the book and whatnot. I think those would probably be the two biggest places I'd start. And leading with that curious mind, I think would be a good start.
I think that goes all the way back to something you mentioned before, which is form relationships, right? Like,
Yep.
definitely there's business relationships to further data security, privacy initiatives, or whatever, but also our own networks, right? Forming those relationships, those bonds. I mean, it's important for all of us. The industry is relatively small, although it feels like it's getting bigger and bigger, but also smaller and smaller every day. So you really got to build those. Um, so in that vein, Daley, if folks want to connect with you, add to your own network, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best place is on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time. I don't monitor it 24/7, but I mean, connect with me. I'm more than happy to have a conversation and talk and share. Like I said, I wouldn't get to where I was today without my mentors, without standing on the shoulders of some great folks. In asking questions and being curious. So if I can help facilitate that, and knowledge share of the industry and whatnot, happy to do so. So please connect LinkedIn, Daley Varghese. You can search for me there. I think that's probably the best and foremost place for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this has been great. It's been really good catching up. It's been a few years. Thank you so much for joining me today, Daley.
Yeah, thank you, Ward. And I appreciate being on and being invited to call. I think this is all very fruitful and just so important to get out there. So you are doing an amazing work. And again, I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And big thank you to the audience. We hoped you enjoyed the episode and learned something today. Please tell others in your network to follow and listen. This has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centro. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte scale data protection without the fuss, please visit centro.io. Catch you next time.